Okay, so please mute yourself and save your questions until the end. And I'll do my 2-minute intro now. So for those of you who are first time with us and wonder who we are, Serverless Toronto started 7+ years ago as a meeting place for function as a service developers. But through COVID, we migrated to online format. And over the time, we realized that we could help businesses by working smarter, not by sprinting faster. And we started defining serverless not just as a tech stack, but as a pragmatic mindset, a way to focus on business value. And this broad definition of serverless allows us to explore various IT topics. So you're asking me about the recording of this meetup. It will end up on our YouTube channel. Go there, check it out. There is many educational events we curated over the last 7 years, and many of them are still relevant. And we are constantly cooking something fresh for you. And nowadays, in my search for the better and simpler RAG solutions, I fell in love with graph databases. And I was lucky that 2 experts on graph databases from Neo4j vendor itself, Tomasz and Oscar, are also writing the book on the very same topic. So nice folks from Manning's have introduced us, and we penciled another lunch and learn for August 22nd. And nothing else is planned after that for now. So if you have good ideas and topics to cover or you want to present, mention it in the survey. So please do the survey at bit.ly/SLSTO. We're always looking for altruistic and new ideas. And last but not least, a big thank you for Manning Publication for supporting us over the years. They generously donate a title at every meetup, but now they upped it. And at this meetup, 10 people will get free copies of Janna's new book. So thank you, Janna, for allowing that. And thank you, Manning. And please fill out the survey, again, bit.ly/SLSTO to qualify for the Manning Publications raffle. And we'll do it at the end of today's session. And for those who do not win, Manning also has a 45% off code for all the digital products for our group. So scan the barcode and enjoy the saving. And let me pass the mic to our guest, Dr. Janna. Janna, thank you for offering to walk us through your new book and share thoughts how product management and software development are converging. The floor is yours. Please take it away.
Thank you, Daniel, for the introduction. And hello again, everyone. So I will share my screen. Can you see the presentation now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Just the controls. Okay, so my talk today will be about doing discovery for AI-driven products. So that's kind of the step that you do at the very beginning before jumping into development. It will be based on my new book, as Daniel mentioned, which is called The Art of AI Product Development. So it has been published a couple of weeks ago, and it kind of summarizes my experience from consulting that I have collected in the past around 10 years. So I did my PhD in AI in 2015. And since then, I have had 2 startups, and I've been also continuously consulting companies on their AI strategies and also on specific AI development projects. And of course, this need and kind of the requests have exploded with the publication of ChatGPT, right? Or the launch of ChatGPT, because companies who didn't have AI on their radar before suddenly were all into AI. So that's why I thought that it would be good to kind of summarize all this knowledge and all those practical learnings into a book. So I think we're all quite excited about AI, and a lot of it is hype, but we all probably agree that there is a huge potential, right? So Daniel, you were kind of complaining a bit that you're becoming a project manager, but I don't think that we can kind of deny that we can automate a lot of things with AI, and then we can also make our own work and lives more impactful and more interesting. But this, or a lot of this, is still in the future. So the reality check today shows that around 80% of AI initiatives in companies actually fail. So these are numbers from a report by RAND Corporation, which was done in 2024. They're not completely new, but I think they're still quite representative. And in fact, similar numbers were also published by McKinsey in 2024, right? And when I look at the corporate landscape and the number of cases where I kind of come into companies, and then instead of building something new and doing really discovery from scratch, there is a need to fix an existing project that's somehow gotten off track, then indeed these numbers actually ring a bell. And the number one reason for these failures, at least that's basically that's how it's described in the RAND report, is basically not that companies have chosen the wrong model or that they didn't manage to set up their infrastructure or whatever. So it's not technical. Rather, it's that companies use AI for the wrong problems, right? So sometimes it's about problems that are insignificant or not important, and then nobody really cares. The problems might be too simple, so then that means that you invest into AI, and in the end, the value add is actually not so like remarkable. Or there are just problems where AI is not the right tool, but since you have someone at the company who wants to do AI, then there's kind of the stubbornness which pushes you then to use AI for a given problem. And this is why it's very important to have a solid discovery process at the beginning. I'm sure that all of you know that, so that's in no way new, but I think it's very important to emphasize, because with AI, you have a lot of new things on the table, both technically and in terms of how basically you create good business value and how you deliver products to the users. And also you always have added complexity on the table, right? So you have uncertainty, you have potential for mistakes, and also in the teams. So when you work in a cross-functional team with different kinds of developers, you have machine learning engineers or even scientists, you have the UX designer, the PM, and so on. Then what we often see is that the ties between all those different functions, they need to be much tighter, and all those different functions need to work much closer together, which adds complexity because they are not speaking the same language normally. So today I would like to take a very simple view on the discovery process, right? So I will split it into 3 stages. The first one is about ideation, so collecting all the good AI opportunities for a given business or a given product. Then we will go into specification. So once you have all those ideas about opportunities, right, then how can you actually start specifying them, validating them, and basically shaping them in a form that also makes you more confident in when you jump into the development. And then, of course, prioritization. So how do you decide what to address first? So let's start with ideation. And let's start with this classical, let's say, PM textbook scenario of how you normally should do ideation. So normally, you start with the opportunity space where you collect all your user needs, pain points, desires, and so on. So here I'm just providing, for the sake of example, a couple of opportunities from a project that we implemented with Lufthansa in the past. So basically, we started it already 2 years ago, and then 6 months ago, we finished it. And our challenge was to build a system for them that monitors all the innovations in the airline industry and then makes specific innovation recommendations, so for adapting new technologies, new business models, and so on, to the company, which are also aligned with their overall strategy. And here you see a couple of opportunities that's already mid-project. So the base system was already running, right? But these are kind of the opportunities that came out from our continuous discovery activities, right? So things like the system should provide alerts when competitors are adding new routes to their schedule, or faster creation of reports and presentation, or a consistent framework for competitor evaluation, and so on, right? So this is your, or that was our opportunity space. And then on the other hand, you also have the solution space, right? And these are kind of all the technical solutions, tools, and the means and methods and so on that are available to you to address those opportunities, right? So you have, for example, let's say rule-based analytics, you have adding more domain expertise to the system, you have AI, right? But we see here that, okay, AI, it's not privileged or prioritized in any way, right? It's just a way to solve specific types of problems. And then you basically try to map the opportunity space to the solution space. So here is an example, partial mapping, right? So for example, when you have an opportunity like alerts when competitors add new routes, you can go two ways. You can use AI, but that will add some error potential, it will add complexity and so on. So in that case, actually it was simpler for us to do it in a rule-based way, just by scraping the data of the companies and basically analyzing them in a deterministic way. Then on the other hand, if we talk about something like faster creation of reports and presentations, then I would say that AI is probably the only like practical way to go if you want to go away from this manual process, right? Because basically you need to have this flexibility that is offered by generative AI. Then looking at the problem of lack of transparency into the data sources, right? It's a B2B setting, high stakes. They will use the system to generate reports and recommendations to their leadership and so on. So they really want to avoid the potential of mistakes and inaccuracies. So if we talk about the transparency, here AI can actually make things worse, because AI always, if you already have a black box in the system, then normally AI will add even more on top of it, right? So here it's really more a question about like working on the UX, on explaining the data, increasing the transparency via the user experience. So that's how you would normally do it in a good like PM setting that's sorted out and where you want to follow the best practices. Now, what happens in real life? And we have seen this quite often, because normally when we come, I mean, our specialty is AI. So normally when we come into companies, they already want to do AI. So you have a bunch of stakeholders that are sitting together in a meeting room or wherever, and then one of them raises this request, okay, we should use AI, let's use AI for something, right? And that, if you're not cautious, then of course you're very likely to run into this fallacy of just using AI for the sake of AI, right? So here you really need to, it can work out, and in fact for us it has worked out in many cases, but that's when you really need to have a very solid and structured and robust discovery process, right? And it works because AI is very broad, right? So there are a lot of like opportunities that you can address with it, and normally, especially in big companies and in digital companies, like I think in any more or less modern company, you can definitely find opportunities that are worthwhile addressing with AI, right? It can be user facing, it can be also inside the business and so on. So what we do in that case is that we work and ideate around the inherent benefits of AI, right? So AI has some clusters of benefits that it normally provides in a business setting. So the first of them is, of course, automation and productivity, right? That's the no-brainer, that's the low-hanging fruit. So you can make tasks like, I don't know, writing emails or fraud detection or maybe monitoring the competitors and so on. You can make them faster, right? And basically much smoother than if they are done manually. Then the second branch is improvement and augmentation. So again, you work on existing tasks, but then you try to kind of improve them with AI. So one example is marketing content generation, right? although many people try or many companies automate it, but normally then you can feel it, right? But still AI can contribute like a larger context, maybe it can bring to you some new ideas and so on about how to improve your content. Then we have innovation. So how can AI really be used to transform the whole business model of the company, right? And that goes a bit into the direction of the discussion that we had at the beginning. So what happens when we kind of automate all the basic tasks that we are doing now, right? Then actually the whole business can get on a new level. But for that, you need AI also to put it on this new level. And then we have personalization. So that's kind of customizing the outputs of your system or the interactions of your system to, let's say, an audience of one user or maybe one department in the company, right? So which would be very difficult or even unrealistic to do in the B2C setting without AI. Right? So these are the four main categories for a B2B. In B2C, we also add some additional benefits, like there is emotional benefits, convenience benefits, and so on. But in the B2B setting, these are the main categories that we have used so far. Just to give you an example, how we then fill these three. Sorry, forgot to mention. Of course, if there are benefits, there are also shortcomings, right? And they're basically that AI is a black box. It introduces uncertainty and it will make mistakes. So if you have use cases that are not compatible with the shortcomings, like let's say you're doing anti-money laundering and you really need like 100% accuracy, then you can either not use AI, or maybe you can use AI to kind of automate a small part of that process, right? Like an anti-money laundering, you would just automate the large scale screening at the beginning, and then at some point you would have the human to come in and to verify those records where the AI has a lower confidence. And yes, now coming to the example of how we filled in this tree for the Lufthansa project. So that was at the very beginning actually of the project, right? So just so you see how those benefits were then kind of broken down into use cases, right? So for automation and productivity, it was quite clear we wanted to do competitor monitoring to see what's happening in the industry, and then also to analyze feedback so we can align the recommendations actually with their customer needs, right? Then for improvement and augmentation, we have identifying and analyzing relevant trends. That's quite, that was something that they really struggled with manually, right? Because there's so much information that it's quite difficult to digest all of it and really have a high confidence in the trends that you recommend or distill. And then recommend, so already generate those service improvement recommendations. In terms of innovation, we went into the direction of so supporting their ideation and brainstorming. That was a basic one. And then from there also into AI-driven prototyping, so they could use it for their co-creation with the customers. And then the personalization, so here it was more about department level customization. So how can we customize the system for the airport department versus the in-flight entertainment department versus the check-in and so on, right? So really inject this more specific domain knowledge into the system. That's just a small excerpt, right? But just to give you an idea of how you can actually map and structure this whole space of AI opportunities, because often what we see is that companies only like focus on one or two use cases. So that's one extreme. And the other extreme is that, you know, they go into this open brainstorming with the whole company, then everybody will submit some kind of ideas without having any like any tangible foundation to them, and then they really also struggle to sort them out and then to prioritize them. And we will talk a bit about prioritization later, but this AI opportunity tree already provides a very good hint about prioritization, right? So when you start out, normally you want to start on the left, because these, as said, they tend to be the low-hanging fruits, right? So automation and productivity, mostly it's about smaller tasks that are done frequently in a high volume. So AI has a very tangible benefit, and this benefit is also very easy to argue for with stakeholders, right? So when you can just quantify something in terms of the, let's say, time savings, and then from there the cost savings, then normally it's quite easy to argue for the AI initiative. And then from there, you can go into those more advanced, but also less tangible phases, right? So if you're in innovation, for example, it might be difficult to clearly quantify the future benefit or the future ROI of the solution, right? But when you gain momentum and basically increase your confidence into AI on the left, then normally you will have an easier time to move to the other branches in the tree. Okay, so with that, now we have all our use cases or feature ideas collected, and now we move into specification and validation, so that just as in normal software development is kind of a loop, right? So you specify a bit, then you validate it, then you specify more, and so on. Before we jump into the mental models, I would like to, let's say, make a note on process. So you saw that the cover of the book, it features a dervish, and I often get asked why that's the case. So basically the dervish stands for this iterative nature of the development process or a discovery process that you should adopt in AI, right? So as said, with AI, you have a high uncertainty. The solutions are often not yet figured out. So it's not like in traditional software, oftentimes the frameworks are already set, you have an architecture in mind and so on. With AI, especially if your company is new to it, many things are really still unknowns. Then AI makes mistakes, and in my experience, it's really important to count in the mistakes from the beginning, right? Because you want to know what will be the cost of the mistakes before you can actually kind of predict or the ROI or the value of your solution, right? And it takes time to learn about those mistakes. As all of you know, I think, when we use ChatGPT, we learn more and more about its different failure modes, right? And the same for all those coding agents and vibe coding tools. And then also users will come with different AI skills, right? So for example, some of them, they can deal with mistakes. So they can deal with this kind of ambiguity. They will build an intuition about how to spot mistakes. But some of them maybe are not yet, right? And you want to understand the AI affinity of your users. Is it dispersed? Some of them are low, some of them are high. Is it maybe high so you can be like more relaxed, or is it low so you really need to try to guard against all kinds of errors and maybe even reduce the functionality of your product? So yeah, it's important to really get into this habit of continuous iteration so you can gradually decrease that uncertainty, right? And here again, not new stuff, so move in small steps, small iterations of prototyping, of experimentation, validation, and so on. And get real as soon as possible. So get out of the building, talk to users, see how they respond to your product, right? I often see that developers are not very, let's say, motivated or don't have the drive to do that. And I think that's natural because AI really brings a lot of technical challenges also, right? So in terms of the model deployment, fine-tuning, training, and so on. But still, I think it's very important to really get out of the building and really, put your AI into the hands of users. And I think there is also now this temptation that, we have ChatGPT and so on under our fingertips and all kinds of advice on how, for example, PMs and product builders in general, how they can automate this process of user research, right? Just by getting the insights from the AI models, which is exciting on the one hand, but I think it's also a risk, right? Because then you can really can really be a big clash for you when your product then actually gets into the hands of users, right? So AI is AI, but humans are humans, and they are quite different from how the AI models work. So with that, let's jump into the two mental models that I would like to show for this phase of specification and validation. And the first one is the AI system blueprint. By the way, I hope that your heads are not turning after looking at the dervishes. I think I'm a bit dizzy, but that's exactly the point, right? So really getting into this habit of iterating continuously and as effortlessly as possible. So now the AI system blueprint. We have our use case, right? So with the AI opportunity tree, we collected a bunch of use cases and some of them seem quite realistic. So we now jump into their specification. So first of all, you need to understand what kind of value AI can actually contribute to that use case, right? So there are questions like how much of the use case can you actually automate with AI, right? So like in that example of anti-money laundering, you wouldn't automate the whole use case. You would just, break it down into its stages, and then you would probably automate this first large scale screening so people don't need to spend too much time on it anymore. That's something that we see quite often, that when you have a longer process, or let's say more kind of a funnel, right? So you have a lot of maybe data or insights or small tasks that are at the beginning, at the top of the funnel. And then you can use AI to automate it. And basically then the people can deal with all this stuff that is more nuanced, that is really needs more human intuition and so on, so more towards the bottom of the funnel. Then, as said, what is the cost of AI mistakes, right? So you want to see what's the impact if the system makes a mistake and the user doesn't notice it, right? So for example, in AML, it's a big deal, especially if it's a false negative. If you look at something like a Netflix or a YouTube recommendation system, then it's not a big deal, right? It's just frustration that will build up on the side of the user. But you really need to understand what's the impact. You need to start estimating how many, so what's the expected accuracy of the system, how many mistakes will actually happen, and then what does it take the user to identify these mistakes, right? So if the user needs 1 hour to identify an AML mistake, right, then probably it's not worth building the system, because in the end, it will not save time. And then the final point is it actually, so do the users actually desire this kind of automation, right? So that's a bit subtle and psychological. So there are some tasks which people just prefer to do themselves, right? So where they value the process more than the outcome, like creative tasks, maybe content creation, of course, all kinds of artistic tasks, although, of course, you can use AI to support you with these too, but really that's a more psychological point where the user research basically needs to give you the certainty. And this is your opportunity, right? So the use case and then the value that you can contribute to it. And then, as we saw before, to each opportunity, we look for a solution. So the solution here looks, or the solution blueprint looks as follows. You start with the data. As you know, data is the fuel for any AI system. Then the data goes into the intelligence component, which basically creates value from the data, right? So here, let me explain. This component contains the models, so basically all that hype that we have around us at the moment. And then it also contains the broader system architecture, because today, most of the systems that are in use businesses, and also most of the B2C systems, they are compound AI system, right? So they have a model at the core, but then they will have many different components around them, right? So it might be about databases, it might be other models, maybe a predictive model that's called by the generative AI model or agent, It can also be guardrails and so on, right? So that's this whole component, which will then help you or allow you to generate value from the data. And then you have the user experience, and the user experience is basically the channel with which you can bring this value to the user, right? So that's the AI system blueprint. It looks super simple, but I have to say that it has been super efficient in practice. So we will dive deeper into the solution space in a moment. But before that, just let me show you how such a blueprint basically looked at the beginning of our project with Lufthansa, right? So, and that was something that was very spontaneous because I was talking like to very different stakeholders, or like leadership, then their research team, then specific departments, and so on. And somehow everybody was talking about different things. So I really had this challenge, how do we bring it together? And this model literally it came up like in a Miro board in a meeting. So it was like a live creation. And since then, we really have used the structure. It has evolved a bit, but honestly, for the last 2 years, we have used it for every single AI project that we had. It's very general, of course, right? But that's the good thing about it, that you can explain every AI system basically using this very general blueprint. So yes, you can use it at the beginning for the specification of your system. You can use it to align different stakeholders, because normally you won't go too much into the technical details here. So it will serve the business side, the user experience side, and then also the tech side. And of course, as you go along and iterate and rotate and validate more, then you can also update it. So everybody always has an up-to-date perspective on the system. So now the exciting part, or actually it will get a bit even a bit more complex, and specifically the solution space. And I assume that most of you are here for that. So that's the whole blue component here, the data, the intelligence, and the user interface. I think it's very important to have a complete view, like in German, we say bird perspective on the AI solution space. So here is the solution space that the book is based on, right? So you can see that there are the 3 components: data, intelligence, user experience. And then for each of them, basically you have subcategories. So for the data, you need to distinguish between different modalities like numeric data, text data, images, and so on. And then you also distinguish between the learning signals that are used by your AI, right? So that can be labeled data, but it can also be unlabeled data, as in the case of clustering. Because these learning signals, they will in the end also determine the algorithms or the models that you can use for your system. Then for the intelligence components, so we have symbolic AI that sounds a bit old school, or I think the term sounds old school, but actually it's very much in use. So we have, for example, Daniel, you mentioned GraphRAG before, right? So of course, GraphRAG is based on knowledge graphs. And knowledge graphs by themselves, they're static rule-based systems, right? So you can build them up and update them using AI, but in themselves, there are structured constructs, just like ontologies, taxonomies, and so on, which are also frequently used today. And then the other branch, of course, is this neural AI and machine learning, which includes predictive AI, generative AI, and agentic AI. By the way, when I talk to people, I often hear that machine learning is something different than AI or than generative AI. So I'm always a bit surprised by that, right? Because generative AI is based on the same, just neural networks that we are training, right? So it's actually definitely part of machine learning also. But anyway, so these two in practice, they can be combined into neurosymbolic AI. And that's also, I think, the largest part of AI systems, again, that we have in use today, it's actually neurosymbolic AI, right? So for example, GraphRAG would definitely be a neurosymbolic system because you combine the graph with an LLM, with document retrieval, and so on. And then the third component, of course, the user experience. So here you have different levels of AI integration, whether it's an add-on feature to an existing product or whether AI is really like at the core of the whole product, right? And the whole premise for the product. Then we have the basic interface types, so conversational, graphical, the hybrid interface, which combines graphical and conversational elements. And we also have this trend, which I find very exciting, of generative UI. So basically a UI that just generates itself on the fly, depending on the previous prompt or a request of the user. And we have the degrees of automation. So that's a continuum basically between assisted AI, where AI just gives you some small inputs and assistance to your task, like Grammarly would do when you're writing your text, or full automation. So just you have a big red button, right? You press it and then your text comes out, right? So no transparency and also no interaction with the AI. So that's kind of the high level overview over the AI solution space. And I think it's super important that teams have this larger level understanding of what AI actually is. So we often see, let's say, misconceived mental models of AI solution spaces when we talk to companies. Let me show you some examples. So that's maybe a bit extreme, right? So we have a solution space that consists of AI agents, right? So somebody just wants to create agents. Before it was chatbots, now with agents, it's about agents. So often this is really just hype, right? And to check it, so what you can do, or if you want to have some fun or to be mean, then you can just ask, okay, what is actually an agent? And what we see in many cases is, of course, that people are not able to give a definition of an agent, right? Or even to describe how it should behave in their specific product or a scenario. Actually, a story just from yesterday, I was attending the AI for Good conference in Geneva. It's organized by the United Nations. So I was at a session about how to regulate agents. And I asked the panelists, okay, what is actually an agent? I didn't have this smiley face on my face, but that was kind of the intention. And they were quite open and honest about it. They were not able to define it, right? So they gave me a working definition, which kind of stemmed from the 90s, from this classical textbook by Russell and Norvig, right? So their whole book is actually based or centered on the idea of intelligent agents, right? But that's kind of the state of understanding that we often have when we talk about these concepts. And we need to imagine that these were people who regulate the space, right? So normally they need to work with very clear-cut and accepted definitions. Now imagine when you hear that in the business context, where there is so much more room for interpretation, then there is even more vagueness, basically, in what an agent can be. Okay, then the next example is this, struggle or a choice between specific model providers. Yeah, so for example, we want to choose between OpenAI and maybe we have a subscription already to Enterprise ChatGPT, but then Anthropic brings some new features or the quality is better for some specific use cases. So now that's kind of the whole solution space, right? Also, of course, the models are actually, like if you look at this taxonomy, they're very much at the bottom of your solution space, right? So before that, you really need to consider many other choices. And a bit higher up and a bit more strategic and also engineering oriented is, of course, okay, do we want to use commercial LLMs, like just out of the shelf? Or do we want to use open source LLMs, right? And here, of course, that's an important question, right? Because commercial LLMs are more for let's say, very quick and fast features, whereas open source LLMs, that's a more long-term undertaking. So they are more appropriate if you really want to build a competitive advantage of AI around AI if you want to kind of build your engineering skills and your infrastructure around it and so on, right? So these are very small and narrow solution spaces, and I think teams should be really mindful of basically taking the full solution space into account. And also, I think that if you have a team of people who are developing an AI product application, whatever, then each of them needs to understand this solution space, right? Because the interdependencies are very strong, right? You might say, why does a UX designer needs to know about the data? But of course, right? Because the data determines the outputs of the AI, determines the final user experience, right? So if your system doesn't have data for a specific department of Lufthansa or our system, then the user experience will just exclude those people from its usage, right? So it should, I mean, these are like very critical distinctions that they then need to make based on the data, and of course also based on the capabilities of the models and the AI, the compound AI system. And then, of course, in many cases, you will be able to narrow down pretty quickly, right? So for example, for this opportunity that we had of generating the reports and the slide decks and so on, okay, it's clear we have a lot of text, so the modality is text, and then we want to generate something new, so we will be using generative AI, right? And that really leads us to this, okay, we need an LLM architecture, which means that we need to select an LLM, and then we need to see, okay, do we want to use a RAG system, maybe a GraphRAG system? Do we maybe even want to fine-tune the models, have an agent setup, and so on, right? So then you can really branch down in the solution space. Here, the challenges, and I think Yusuf mentioned his confusion about learning about all the updates before, right? So here, the deeper down you get, the basics are all set, right? So this picture that I showed before, something that exists like for years or even decades, right? But the deeper down you get, the more dynamic things get, right? So you have new architectures that are coming up, and of course you have all those new models, frameworks, tools, and so on that are coming up. So here we have something for you. And specifically at the moment, we are developing an AI radar. So that will be a browser-based application that basically screens a large quantity of publications on AI, including the scientific publications, but also all kinds of tech blogs, also thought leadership by McKinsey and Co. And basically it will always provide you with an up-to-date structured overview of the current AI solution space, but also the opportunity space, because it has a large library of use cases that are included. So this radar will be launched at the end of August. If you're interested, please subscribe to the waitlist. And we are also conducting user tests at the moment. So, so it might be that we ping you for a user test. And of course, you're not obliged to accept it. Okay, and now coming to the last step, to the prioritization. So that will be quite short, because normally, of course, if you have done a good job at specification and validation, then the prioritization will be quite easy. Though I need to say that in this talk, I didn't cover the question of how to estimate the development cost, effort, and so on, right? So that would be a topic for a separate talk. And by the way, if you're interested, then just ping me using whatever channel, and then maybe we can publish an article or even a presentation on the topic. But in general, for a prioritization, okay, we have those matrices. I think all of you have seen something and used something similar, right? So you have your opportunities, and then you have those basic metrics. Let's say you have user impact, you have business value. In B2B, user impact is probably very much correlated with business value. And then you have the technical feasibility and the technical effort, basically, to implement the opportunity. and then you sum them up and you get your total score, right? So very simple view. It can be useful. It provides clarity. It provides numbers that can make many people happy in your company, right? But it misses a lot of nuance. So again, here in AI, I think you need to also kind of dive and embrace all the nuances of the task, right? Because if you're working like on traditional software products, then again, you might have all those criteria and strategic priorities and so on all figured out, right? But with AI, you kind of need those additional discussions, reflections, and so on to set up the framework, right? So how to add more depth to your prioritization and more flash? We already saw an indicator with the AI opportunity tree, right? So there our approach is in most cases to try to start on the left with the low-hanging fruits, right? You can gain momentum and you can start increasing the AI skill level, the confidence, and then basically the company will be on a good basis to move to the more advanced AI challenges. Then strategic alignment. So normally when we come into a new company, we will always study their corporate strategy. So have conversations, have insights into the strategic documents, which we can get our hands on, and so on. That might seem a bit far-fetched, especially for like very big companies like Lufthansa, but you need to consider that most companies, they don't have an AI strategy so far, right? So, or an explicit AI strategy. So you can use their corporate strategy to infer some important things about the AI strategy. Like this question, is AI just, just a catch-up feature because everybody is doing it and we need to do it too? Or is it a strategic differentiator, right? So high-level question, but then, for example, if you go into a discussion, okay, open source or commercial LLMs, then you might want to have this information, right? Because it will kind of determine this choice. And then, of course, any kind of custom criteria that might be relevant to generate the business value. So like there's scalability and scalability. So obviously in terms of the kind of number of requests that you want to serve, but then also the generalization power, right? So how much, how diverse the users will actually be. So for example, in our case with Lufthansa, so we build the system for the whole company, but then we noticed that, okay, actually every department has slightly different needs. So in terms of the data sources, in terms of the companies that they want to monitor, and so on, right? So we needed a lot of domain expertise from these different departments, and domain expertise doesn't scale well, right? So if you're building a system and you know that you will need different kinds of domain expertise to serve different users, then don't hope for it to scale fast or to scale well, right? Because domain expertise is always something that needs human input, needs human in the loop, needs manual input, right? So that's something that can hold you back from scaling. Then, of course, governance or privacy constraints, security constraints, these can be like very hard constraints and filters on what you can actually build and about first. And then competitive differentiation. So again, coming back to this question of how much do you actually want to overtake your competitors with AI versus catch up with them, right? And if you want to take them over, not overtake, I think it's take them over, then basically you really need to kind of also build this in from the beginning. So starting with the whole models and the basic setup that you're choosing, so you can then build a sustainable competitive mode, also have a very robust data flywheel, right? So you can kind of also be faster and more efficient in collecting the data. So you can eventually be faster than your competitors. Okay, so that was it for today. Let me just summarize the main points for each of these stages. So for ideation, yes, you will always risk, I think, at the moment of running into this trap of AI for the sake of AI. How to avoid it? Ideate around the inherent benefits of AI, right? So assume that AI can create value in your business. You just need to find the right opportunities for it. Then for specification and validation, get into this habit of continuous iteration, so increasing your confidence, decreasing the uncertainty, and also be mindful of exploring the full solution space and of not narrowing it down and going too deep down too early. For prioritization, start with strategic alignment. Of course, then derive custom criteria for your prioritization, and don't try to turn prioritization just into a numeric exercise. So really try to embrace all those discussions, reflections, maybe also disagreements with your team, because that's eventually what will also contribute to your overall AI strategy, to setting your priorities and then making your choices in terms of the opportunities and the solutions that you're addressing. Good. I was talking about different things, the AI radar, the book, and there are many other things that are in the making. So I have a Substack. It's called AI for Business. So it's basically bridging this gap between the technology and the real users, and especially in the B2B context. So if you're interested, and if this kind of approach, which is a bit, let's say, I would say it's quite structured and also more foundational. So I always try to strip away all the hype from the content. So if that resonates with you, then please subscribe and then follow the updates. Thank you.
This was just amazing. You're so smart, and we're lucky to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
So you're lucky as a consultant. You get at the top. You're competing with Accentures and Deloittes of the world. We are hired when the mistakes are already made. So, which is, I'm not complaining. As a consultant, I would not be brought. You know, there was a saying where I come from: donkeys not invited to the weddings to party, but to carry water. So we are getting them out of the mistakes they made. But this is just amazing. Thank you so much. So I'll open the floor for questions. I think Craig had a question here. Craig, you can open microphone if you can talk. So we'd have to read, or Daryl, or anybody who. Who wants to go first?
I think Craig's trying to talk, but it's not coming through. We can't hear you, Craig.
But I think I see the questions in the chat, so it's
Okay.
about
Oh, okay.
20%.
Okay.
Yeah. Craig, to be honest, I'm not I don't remind that mathematical details, but let me share the report with you, if that's fine. Yeah. And the second question is the successful 20% differentiate by having one senior person. That I don't get it, to be honest. So senior person in AI? Okay, whether it's political. Okay. Let me share the report. It has a very nice description of the reasons why AI projects fail, right? And the two main reasons are basically the wrong problems, different kinds of like bad choices in that field, but it also definitely includes the political aspect, and also this aspect of how business communicates with the tech teams and so on, which I think is also very relevant in this crowd.
You're going to share the link in the chat, or on screen? What do you mean share?
Let me check it. Here is the link.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. So our next question, Daryl, you had a question.
Yeah, I just had a couple of, not really questions, but sorry, plain flying overhead. Related to what I see in my company, and I suspect it's probably a common thing in other organizations where concerns around being able to claim intellectual property based on things that are created at least partially using help from Gen AI tools. I'm not sure if you see that kind of thing with any of the companies you work with.
So you mean in terms of the content that's created, or?
So basically, if we use it to create products, we use Gen AI tools to create products. The Gen AI was part of who created it rather than me out of my head creating the product. And then later when we make trademarks on that code or that product, there's concerns from our legal people at least that we're not going to be able to say that we own that and it could be challenged potentially in the future. And I'm not sure if that's the kind of thing where other companies are struggling with.
Siemens
that's
has
a
the same
very-
thing. How much code
Yeah.
is generated by the AI?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So for us, normally, when we go into the companies, we will basically build or use our existing code base, right? So the code is on our side, right? And we'll provide the systems to them via APIs or via browser-based interface. So for us, it hasn't been an issue so far, but now yeah, I don't know, maybe someone else has experience in this group. Daniel,
I've
what's your...
researched it a little bit. I can tell you that if you, for GitHub Copilot specifically, Microsoft indemnifies the companies against legal challenge if they are challenged for intellectual property, as long as you keep in place their guardrails that are in place to avoid license problems with open source code. I'm guessing that I haven't looked at OpenAI's and Anthropic's indemnity releases, but I'm guessing that pretty much everybody would need that. But I know Microsoft has that for sure.
I know AWS mentions that in their legal terms for the Q developer. If you use the Pro version, it's a similar thing. We're keeping our legal people very busy looking at all these different models and all these new tools as they come out, of course, looking at these kind of questions. So the other one, of course, is not about trademarking things, but about when code that is generated using these tools maybe does something with the product, or in our case, we're telecom equipment manufacturer. So if it changes, it encourages the user to go and change something in the network that later leads them to some kind of loss of dollars, then they can go back and sue them. There's different angles to it. Like one
Well,
is
it's
about
product
who owns.
liability, basically, but you have that already.
Yeah. Well, there's the lawyers are combing through the legal terms of all the various models and trying to understand it all. We're, like I say, we're keeping them very busy every week, coming up with another model and another tool. Hey, can we use this tool? Can you guys go and look at that? So it's keeping those kind of people in our organization at least very busy. So
that's why, I mean, for us, we're going with the big providers like we're primarily AWS, but we're launching quite a bit more on the Microsoft side. We're doing both, and primarily .NET developers. But we look to those indemnities that we get from AWS, and we're SOC 2 compliant. We have to preserve that, and so I would say that we rely on the protections that we get from our vendors.
Any other experiences on the topic? Copyrights and AI generated code. I can tell you my opinion. Like I've seen that at Siemens, they also wanted to use GitHub Copilot, not the tool we were building, because of this extra insurance that they get. But there are two concerns hidden behind the same legal concern. One is if the AI will generate the code that already somebody wrote, so that company can sue you. And that one is quite easy to overcome. There are guardrails on the output. And very often, like GitHub Copilot would stop you, say, code found already in the code base. So you don't allow it. Like behind the scene, it does generate the code, but there are checks when it spits it out, whether it's copyrighted somewhere or not. And the other one is just a matter of trust, whether you trust AI-generated code. I think we'll have to get used to that, that somebody else is doing the work. It's like you're not driving the car, it's a pilot, you give control to driving the plane. Mm-hmm. So it's mindset adjustment. That's, to me, just the fear of the companies. That's how I see it with the work, limited work, as a developer being stopped by lawyers.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that code is kind of becoming a commodity now, right? So it's
Yes.
yeah, let's see how it will
And,
play out with this
and you know,
trademark.
like around the house, like as a husband, I'm supposed to be handyman. And I have this friend before, he would say, I build a deck, but he never literally went in and built a deck. He was, no, I designed it and hired somebody to build it. That's how I feel today with AI. I come up with the idea, it's my deck. But who cares who delivered it? I'll be the one doing quality assurance. Is it safe to be used? That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. I pasted an interesting paper that I read on the topic a couple of weeks ago. So I just pasted it in the chat. And it's really about, Daniel, just as you say, right? So basically the task of developers, but also of PMs and then the UX designers on the team. It's shifting from just mastering the craft to specifying what needs to be done, right? So these guys, they work on a really, I thought it was quite interesting. We didn't use it so far, but I thought it was quite interesting. So a framework basically on how the designers, the developers, and the PMs, so the product managers on the team, can bring their specifications together, right? So the design constraints, the business requirements from the PM, and then of course all those architectural choices and guidance then from the developers, and then they bring it together, and then this is passed to the LLM. So basically it can build the whole product around it. Of course, you will need to fix many things later on, but but I think that that's kind of the future, right? So it yeah, and that's also why the talk was so much focused about, okay, what are we actually going to solve, and then giving a first guidance in terms of the implementation.
And is there anybody else? So there was one more question before we started the meetup. We were defining, because you come from the product world, I come from software world, definition of testing, acceptance testing, like evaluation, and you covered that in a book as well. And now we just touched it again. Can you talk about testing importance in the AI world and user feedback and testing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there is a lot of, I think a lot of also content now around evals, right? So how to evaluate those LLMs, and many will say that the evaluations is actually kind of the competitive mode of smaller AI companies or AI startups. So I mean, traditionally, how we evaluated machine learning systems was using mathematical metrics like precision, recall, accuracy, and so on, right? So that was kind of very clear, and the metrics were also very clear, and that was all fully automated and quite, I mean, much simpler to do than today, because today, so we can have automated evaluation and LLM as a judge, right? We can see how accurate the responses of the LLM are. So there are different kinds of frameworks for this kind of automated evaluation. But then what we see is that these metrics, they are often in no way representative of the user needs and the user preferences, right? So that's why it's very important also in this iterative spirit to just release the system as early as you can without any reputation loss or any legal risks, right? And then you will put it into the hands of users. You will collect their requests, the responses of the model, maybe some additional explicit feedback by the users and so on. And then based on this, you can try to define, okay, what are the categories of issues that the users have, of failures and so on, right? And a lot of it is very subjective. So Daniel, to your point about GraphRAG, it's actually something that we are really on also at the moment. And I'll find it later, but there is an article, it's called the GraphRAG Manifesto by Neo4j, right? And they provide a super clear like differentiation of how a traditional RAG system performs versus a GraphRAG system, right? So there is a question about a question for asset managers about companies that might be exposed to lithium battery shortage. And the traditional GraphRAG system, it provides like a very accurate and very truthful description of all the potential companies that might be like under this risk of lithium battery shortage. And the GraphRAG system really identifies the precise companies. So it provides you a list of companies, which of course is much more helpful to the user, right? But that's something that would be very difficult to capture in an automated way, right? So that's why it's super important to really be like with the users, collect all those interactions, and then really also have a human eye on it.
Amazing, thank you. And this is a good reminder for people to come back in August, another Lunch and Learn. We will have folks from Neo4j talking about it. And I'm probably wrong, but it may, or maybe not. Tomasz is the creator of that manifesto. He's going to be the one talking. So, and his roots are like yours in the ML and AI, the old-fashioned. He just started using AI now.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely join, and I think that knowledge graphs as a basis for a knowledge representation, especially in B2B, where you need this kind of transparency and structure and so on, it's really it's really like a very future-oriented thing.
I have a question. So we have a web group, and they do the traditional SEO and try to implement recommendation engines, and some of that they're trying to do with RAG, but it sure looks like that the GraphRAG is a more appropriate use, for recommendation engines, aren't they, in general?
I think that in theory, it's definitely much more appropriate, right? Because you will have a lot more of semantic structure. You have the ability or the possibility to aggregate information from the data set into the graph and so on. But building up the graph is not trivial, right? So you need to build it up and then you need to maintain it. If you have it already, then.
So my thoughts, and I haven't done this yet, were to for the structured projects that we're doing. AWS has a way in their managed Bedrock services where you can combine multiple knowledge bases, and one can be a graph, one can be the vector embedding, and another one could be the structured. My thoughts were, if we weren't getting the results that were pleasing or useful to the customer, that would probably take those three together and use an LLM to summarize the results back to the person for the same query from the person doing the question and the whatever interface you would choose.
But do you already have the graph? Or would you need to build it up to extract the information from the...
I would need to build it up and then the appropriate pipelines to keep it up to date, just like I'm doing on the structured data into a lakehouse with lake formation and any other RAG knowledge base. So still have to have the pipelines.
Yeah. So I would say that you need to differentiate how your users are not happy, right? If they're not happy about the tone of the system or the style of its responses, then it will probably not help. But if you have too many hallucinations, right? And if you really see that more context would help, then I would say that that's definitely a valuable add-on, right? But you really need to see how much effort you need to build the graph, and then again start with a small graph and then
I haven't played with a graph, but hallucinations and accurate information is really the driving force between that demo that I did with an entire month's worth of invoice data, where getting to it as structured data and letting the LLM generate the SQL and then verifying it against the real numbers, that seems to be what they care about the most for this one. So the next customer will probably be different, but they want accurate information out of their ERP.
Cool. So we are coming close to the lunch break to most of the people who are working today. We have still 10 minutes. Any last closing questions before I do survey? I do the money raffle and 11 book giveaway. Any questions? Or you can talk while I'm sharing the screen then. Let's see if everybody yes, not too many people did the survey. Janna, I did your name as well, because the raffle, the first one, will be for any free Manning product. So let's see, share. What's
And maybe
happening?
I can just share
Go
about
ahead.
the book real quickly.
Mhm.
So basically, the
Yes.
book is structured in 3 parts, right? And
Mhm.
discovery is the first part of the book. So after a discovery, you have development. In development, it goes quite into detail about the solution space, so with predictive AI, with all the LLM topics, and also agentic AI. And then the final part is about integration and adoption, so things like user experience, governance, stakeholder communication, and so on, right? Because adoption, I think it's a key challenge for companies at the moment, right? Even if you build the best AI system and then nobody uses it, then you're kind of in trouble. Right, so that's why we really, and also when we go into companies today, we really place a lot of attention to this topic of how it actually gets adopted, about educating the users, about satisfying all the, and also researching all their governance constraints and so on.
Yes, awesome. And so when we were planning the meetup, we limited to this part of presentation, but you're going to probably be reading the book. There is lots to learn from Janna. So let me share the screen. Can you see the wheel of names? Am I sharing the correct screen?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. So the first name will be for any Manning product. It's 100% off of any digital product here. So that's why I did you, Janna. After that, we're going to give 10 coupon codes for free book of yours. So good luck. Let's spin. Yusuf, you deserve it. You opened up
Yeah,
with the questions. So
leave the confusion.
yes. I think perfect. Like if I were to choose somebody to give this, it would be you. So thank you, Yusuf.
Thank you.
Paste your email in the chat so I can share with you the coupon code. So that's for this part. Let me stop sharing. And then in the chat, Manning has gave me 10 coupons for Janna's book. So it will be first come, first serve. Let's see. So do not start from the first at the same time. Randomize so you have more odds to getting Janna's book. So these are all coupons, 10 coupons. So you're going to go to your Manning dashboard, choose Janna's book. Do we have a link to it? PDF. Janna, do you have a link for your book on Manning website so they don't need to search? So
Here you go.
So enjoy that part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the first coupon is for any of the products. These are specifically for your book. Thank you for allowing this to happen. This is really generous. So we normally give one free book, but 10 lessons. So
Excited to see such a big crowd, and also I see a lot of challenges, and that's so exciting. And yeah,
but
as
thank
said,
you
I
for
think a
sharing.
lot of the potential is still like in the future, but it's our task to shape it, right, and to explore it.
Thank you for sharing. Like this is what you shared today is a secret sauce of big consulting companies, Accenture and Deloitte. That's how they make money, and you're tackling them head on, which shows your capabilities. And
yeah, I mean, to be honest, with Lufthansa, we have kind of thrown out a bigger consulting company from the competition, right? Because that was exactly what they were lacking. They were coming with their PowerPoints and all kinds of, like theoretical best practices and insights, but then they kind of lacked this more technical and also very agile and iterative approach.
So if people want to keep in touch with you beyond Substack and the book, like, do you have some forums where you like to chat? I'm on LinkedIn, you're on email, so we miss one another often. Like, is there a preferred communication channel for people who watch this video and want to ask you for help or to learn more, or even to work for you? Because you are now a rainmaker. You will be getting the jobs that neither you nor AI will be able to solve. You will be hiring. I'm telling you, like months from now. So.
Okay, bright future then. LinkedIn is definitely a good channel. Yeah. So I'm posting sometimes about all my conference trips and insights from the United Nations in Geneva and so on, right? So there is also some, hopefully some interesting insights to follow. Yeah, and also just ping me on LinkedIn if you have any questions or requests, then always happy to reply.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we are like close to an end. Any closing thoughts, John, anyone? Okay. Just honored.
Not in particular. It was a fantastic presentation. Thanks again, Janna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's not about what happened, it's about where we are going. This is like ahead of you, everyone.
Yeah, yesterday, also in the session about the regulations, so I really felt like people are talking a lot backward, right? So they talk about those questions of data security and so on, and data privacy. And of course, these are important questions, right? And you need to find a way to regulate. But then on the other hand, so many of these models are already trained and they have all kinds of messy data in them, right? So for me, actually, the big question is like, what happens when AI really does replace jobs, right? So it will like, what happens to our societies as a whole, right? Because now I feel like we're on this road of replacement, right? So of course, all the big companies, at least here in Europe, they are on a cost-saving trip. So if they're happy to automate something to replace someone, then they're happy to adopt it, right? But I think we should rather use AI to really put those businesses on a new level so people actually also can do like higher level jobs and then create more impact. But yeah, so far the regulations are not looking at this. So I think it's also in our hands to shape it.
And you're not safe wherever in the world you are, because when I was young, outsourcing from US to Canada, then to India, now to AI. So everybody's job is on the line, unless we become something else, like what you described, the picture you painted.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that, people, people will tend to go the more convenient way, and businesses also, right? Which is, of course, about saving costs and replacing. So, yeah, but that's not the good way for society, I believe.
Yusuf's idea to become farmer wasn't bad either. You'll see another way how to use AI there.
Yeah, back to the roots.
I mean, you don't have to become a conventional farmer. You have IoT, use AI to do that.
Okay, yeah, that's. Yusuf, you know what? In the first version of the book, I had a chapter which actually had a case study on agriculture. It was on irrigation with AI. But then it was like too technical for the publisher, so I had to strip this. Sorry for that. I can send you the draft though if you want.
Definitely, please do that. Please do that.
Please share. Please share. I'll share with the forum then. That's awesome.
Okay.
So Weekend is coming. Enjoy it. Stay safe. Stay sane. Crazy world. Good and bad.
You're based out of Toronto?
Yes. Richmond Hill, like suburbs. I work from home.
Do you also do these meets in person as well here? I'm also
We used to, but like it's much easier this way. And how would Janna attend in-person meets? So it opens the possibilities for
it's the summertime. We can call Janna here.
So I recommend AI Thinkers. If you want to see AI meetups in Toronto, it's AI Thinkers is a good place. But they're so swamped. It took me 4 months to get whitelisted and invited first time. So you have to kind of keep begging and to be invited. So AI Thinkers, that's the group. They're worldwide, but Toronto chapter was quite good, and they do not record it, so you really feel the energy of in-person meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it from me. Janna, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank
and
you,
to Marin
Daniel.
for introducing us.
Good weekend, everybody.
Yeah, have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Bye.